Hey everyone and welcome back. So today we get to learn a whole bunch about the future of the Shadowlands. There is actually quite a bit of good, there is a little bit of not so good, and overall it does make for a very interesting picture. And of course it is via Preach and Ian. Ian, of course, being Ian Hazzikostas, game director of World of Warcraft. There is so much to get into. A quick thing though, it's the last day of the month, so it's the last day for you to get this axe. And of course, all the other things that are on our Patreon loot for this month. And with that said, let's roll, and I'll kick it off with some of the good news. Well everyone, tier sets are returning in patch 9.2. And yes, Ian clarified, that means unique armor for each class, as well as tier set bonuses. And that is obviously just fantastic to hear. I mean, hey, in my opinion, who needs the likes of Conduits and Azerite, borrowed power for the expansion in a big system, when each new raid tier gives you something new and exciting for your class? I love that, it's exciting. And in my opinion, some form of tier set for perhaps the Mythic Plus players would really be a good thing and would make sense in the modern game. And maybe, if those things are successful, we can scale back some of modern WoW's bloat. And maybe Blizzard thinks the same, because what about that modern systems bloat? Well, in the interview, Ian pretty much said that they've been stuck in a bit of a trap, and that they are talking about this quite a bit internally. And that is definitely good to hear. Now, this all happened because you can't keep on giving people new abilities and new talents every single expansion and then being permanent, because you do that for, 4 expansions, and then you've got severe bloat and then homogenization between the classes and specs. So Legion, of course, responded to that by just going all out, giving you big borrowed power for just one expansion. Okay? Now, Ian said that he knows that moving from Legion to BFA felt really bad. And he said that now what they want to do is strike a bit of a middle ground of actually getting, as he put it, RPG-like character progression between expansions. So that, for an example, your mage can leave the Shadowlands being a bit more powerful, having a bit more. Now, Ian really did make it seem to me like they've got some plans for after Shadowlands. I mean, he even talked about, and it's pretty much a quote, getting out of that trap. And that does sound good to me. I mean, there's even things like, Ian saying that he was happy, or the teamers happy with Covenants, even though you look at the Covenant statistics and there doesn't seem to be that much choice. He's sitting there saying, oh, very happy with how all the Covenant stuff is going. But it was kind of in a way where it very much sounded like, I'm happy with how it was for this expansion, but I don't think we're going to do it again. So, who knows? I guess 10.0 and the next BlizzCon will be very interesting to watch. Now, Ian did say that he thinks they need to relax their fear of class bloat a little bit. And I guess in relation to borrowed power and the expansion to expansion resets. And he basically said they're happy with the Shadowlands ecosystem overall, but they do want to keep some of that character progression going forward. So yes, basically it seems like they're happy enough, but they don't exactly want to do what they've been doing again, which is good. Next up, Warlords of Draenor and Content Cadence. On Content Cadence, it was a pretty simple answer. Ian basically just said, we wish this patch was coming out a lot sooner, and, they had the delay, COVID was happening, this patch is the first one, 9.1 that is, that they have made entirely during COVID, so obviously there have just been troubles with the team. I think we know that, they know that, that's just what it's like. Now, as to people saying, will Blizzard jump ship in this expansion like they did with Warlords of Draenor? Warlords of Draenor had only had one major patch, and they cut the Shattrath raid tier. Well, Ian said they're not jumping ship, and that there will be a patch 9.2. Now, to that, a bunch of people basically said, hey Ian, Warlords of Draenor had a patch 6.2. And that's actually really unfair, because Warlords of Draenor did have a patch 6.2, but you've got to remember, Warlords of Draenor had 2 smaller opening raids, and then it had patch 6.1, which was absurdly small. It wasn't, you'd barely even count it as a minor content patch these days, right? So it's that thing where patch 9.1 is a more significant content patch. It is a major content patch. Now, it's in the smaller end of what a major content patch is, but it is a major content patch. So expect patch 9.1 and then patch 9.2. If you get just both of those, it's a lot bigger than Warlords of Draenor. Now, Ian did tease mind-blowing things happening. regarding 9.2. And I'll just say this, if you watched yesterday's lore video on the channel, then I think you're going to have a pretty damn good idea of what those mind-blowing things could actually look like. Korthia time, where I've got good news and a bone to pick. So, there is, Ian said, more to come than what's on PTR, and that will include events, more dailies, and rares. And you know, it's kind of tricky, because here's my bone to pick. Usually, back in previous patches, Blizzard would put content onto the public test realm, along with a blue post that would explain their intent with said content. Korthia got a few bullet points in the patch notes, none of which explained what to expect. And this meant that testers had no idea what to actually expect, and they didn't know what Blizzard's intent was. And that basically just meant it was very hard to do any feedback because we had no idea what was going on. We're left guessing. So I'm going to say this, Blizzard, if you are going to ask for our time to help you test your game for free and provide some feedback, then you need to up your communications game, because in this regard it is seriously lacking. We need to know intent, because if we understand intent, then we can give feedback. Look, it's a situation where even if I disagree with your intent, as long as I know what your intent is, I could at least give feedback of, I don't particularly like this, but I do think it matches your intent. So I don't think it's too much to ask the lead developer or senior enough person for a particular feature to just pen a few words to explain what the intent is. That will help us all out so much, and it will cut down confusion, and that would be great. Now, rewards-wise, I've got some other good news. There was going to be something like with mana pearls, and it was very, very, I guess, funny and almost adorable to see Mike's eyes explode whenever Ian said mana pearls. Now, of course, Ian did say no repeat of the benthic lottery. And you know what I'd say? They're good, and what that will basically mean for all of us is when you do stuff in Korthia, and likely the rest of the MAW, you'll get some sort of currency. You'll probably be able to hand that into a vendor to get some gear. Perhaps you'll be able to upgrade that gear. And of course, there is the 20% stat bonus upgrade for these MAW-touched items that are referenced in an upgrade, but are not actually seen in the PTR right now. Those may factor in as well. So, that's what's going on there. Overall, I think Korthia will still be fairly conservative. It's not that big. I'm not convinced there'll be a lot of content there, but that stuff is moving in a better direction, so that is good news. Well, next up, I certainly have some news for you. We know what's going on with the 2 new legendary upgrade ranks. Many people hoped that Torghast would be over. It does seem like it's not, but there's a bit more to it. So, the new legendary upgrade tiers do use soul cinders, which are the currency that will come from the new higher layers, difficulties that is, of Torghast. Now, when you do one of those higher layers, you'll get the soul cinders, but of course, you'll also get the soul ash, because of how Torghast rewards work, where if you do layer 10, you get all of the rewards from layer 1 through to 10. So if you do a layer 11 of Torghast, you will get both soul cinders and a whole bunch of soul ash. And that will basically mean that upgrading your Legos, your current ones, from ranks 4 up the way to 6, that will, of course, also earn you some Soul Ash, which, of course, is the currency that will be used for purchasing new legendaries and upgrading those through the 9.0 legendary upgrade ranks. Now, the upshot, the TLDR, is that weekly Torghast play will remain a fixture of World of Warcraft for performance-oriented players. And it will be required for your legendary progression, just like how it was in 9.0. So to many people, that will basically mean, oh, I still have to grind up my Torghast wings. So a lot of people will then think Torghast. Now, I will note here that Ian said that they're not super happy about Soul Ash on alts, so perhaps something could happen there. But what's core to the understanding here is actually the broad changes that they're making, which I think are actually quite good, which Ian also explained. The game design of Torghast is getting better. Simple as that. Ian gave an overview of what it will look like, and here's the TLDR. The actual game mode of Torghast seems like it will be miles better. So, there's a new scoring system of between 1 and 5 gems, and basically a 1-star to 5-star rating, and that will depend on the amount of score that you get. With that score being a mix of things like how long it took you to clear Torghast, or how much of a floor that you have completed, along with other things like, say, getting a score multiplier by killing enemies. Now, you might be worried about a speedrun. I think I was, Preach was too. Well, the good news is that their goal is that both the speedrun and thorough playstyles can get you a 5-gem score. So basically then, it seems that you will earn your soul ash, etc., based on your performance. So let's just say you die at floor 6. Well, that's okay, because based on the score you got thus far, you still will get some soul ash and cinders. Now, I will say this, I do imagine that speedruns will become the meta because, of course, if it's a speedrun, it's faster, and if people are just doing it to get soul ash, they will want to do it the fastest way they can. But it's good that people who are more comfortable just going slow and thorough, it seems like they'll be accounted for in this system, but ultimately, we need to see how the balance shakes out there. Now, also, they're going to have some positive and negative affixes for our runs to spice them up, and I believe new powers as well. Next, though, we've got something that makes me very happy. Tower Knowledge is something that is earned by playing Torghast, right? So your runs get you Tower Knowledge. Tower Knowledge is another currency, but it's one that is used on a Torghast talent tree. And I think that's great. You're progressing Torghast by doing Torghast. That is so much more sensible than progressing Torghast by doing the Maw. And if you look at games like Rogue Legacy, Rogue Legacy is one, Dead Cells is another, having that intra-run progression is pretty core to many games in that genre, and I think it fits great in Torghast. Now for the disappointing bit. Reward-wise, basically it seems like it's only going to be Soul Ash and Cinders. Ian said there would be no gear rewards, and he did indicate that there would be new cosmetic rewards to go along with this new system, though I do believe there'll be the likes of, achievements and titles. We'll have to see what they put on there. Obviously, the more the merrier. Now, Ian did say that they think that this version of Torghast will be a great foundation going forward. I hope it is. But it did piss me off when he said that, right? And this is a theme in this interview. I mean, does that mean Torghast will only be good and robust by patch 9.2? That it will only be great by patch 9.3? The end of the expansion? Because, I'm sorry guys, it was a box feature for 9.0, and it is simply not acceptable for it to be in a sorry state for so long. And this is the type of thing that happens, when a game is clearly labeled as early access, right? Where the developers are still dialing in what the core of the experience is. Unfortunately here, the vibes of World of Warcraft as a paid beta test, they're extremely strong. I think that Torghast should have launched with a good scoring system and robust rewards. Because that's what I expect from Blizzard Entertainment, a AAA developer making one of the biggest games on Earth, one of the most profitable ones. Torghast has fewer rewards than Island Expeditions. What is going on? So why put all of this work into Torghast, right? All of this work into, I guess, what ended up being a very risky feature, only to hamstring it by not giving it enough. So look, for patch 9.1, these changes are great, but if there are no new rewards beyond Soul Ash and Soul Cinders, then people will still see this as a chore, even though the scoring system is better, and, a few whoopsies doesn't mean you get nothing. Why is that? Well, it's because people will do their Soul Ash/Cinder runs for the sake of their legendaries. They'll feel they need their legendaries, so they'll be doing it for that reason, even though they may not want to. Then they'll feel burnt out. So even if it turned out that the Twisting Corridors was incredible fun and had loads of cool new rewards under this exciting scoring system, well, a lot of people would be burnt out because of this mandatory feeling need to get the Soul Ash and the Soul Cinders. And that just sucks the oxygen out of Torghast. That makes me sad, and I'm very unhappy about these paid beta vibes, and that continues. Continues because their take on Conduit energy is that it is imperfect. And Ian proceeded to roll out the same goddamn talking points that Conduit energy, facilitates a semi-rigid system that sits in between your class and talent choices. Yawn. Look, why are you still doing this? Who is it actually serving? Please, please can I have a real world example of a real life person who benefits from Conduit energy rather than the usual thing that happens when, unfortunately, members of the WoW team get rolled out in front of a camera and they give their old abstract, theoretical, philosophical musings that, they're all very interesting to listen to, but when the rubber hits the road in a real world scenario, I don't think it actually jives with the experience of playing World of Warcraft. Ian says that the routine of having to hearth and swap out single target for AoE conduits and vice versa would add an extra layer of an inconvenience and that it would undermine elements of choice. Though in actuality, limiting the amount of times the players can swap out their conduits for different types of content that they may want to do, or perhaps on different specs that they play on their character, that very literally does limit choices in a very direct way for those players. And while Ian does recognize that certain soulbinds are just not viable to even consider when, say, queuing Arena, his solution is to further balance the soulbinds rather than doing the most simple thing that comes to mind, which is to remove Conduit energy. Because guess what? If something in your talent tree is unbalanced, and it's, not viable, you can just swap your talent over, and that's it. You don't have to wait for Blizzard to fix it in the next patch. Ian even goes so far as saying that increasing the recharge rate of Conduit energy is on the table. To which I say, please stop. Why? This is a bloody waste of time. Just remove Conduit energy. Ian said this: if you aren't willing to accept something that is 0.5% suboptimal in exchange for flexibility, that's almost impossible to accommodate. To which I say, what do you mean? What do you mean? You can very easily accommodate this. You can do it by just letting players freely choose what conduits and soulbinds they want to use. I do not think that is hard to understand, and I play as a player who will sometimes choose the more simple talent to play with so that, I don't get screwed and confused when I'm doing a boss fight. I'm okay to do that. I mean, come on. Look, it is, again, very much a case here that instead of letting players decide how they want to optimize and play their characters, Blizzard is being Big Brother. It is trying to decide for people, and it's telling people how they can or cannot optimize their characters, and when they can and cannot. I saw Asmongold do a few of his takes to this, and he says he likes to call it a game developer problem. And I actually really do quite agree there, and I think the way that he puts it is just immediately readable to a lot of people. It's the sort of thing where if you're a game developer looking at a whole bunch of systems like they are, they can see a bunch of problems that arise in their head. But that has to go through a filter, in my opinion, of how much of those problems actually impact the average player in a real-world scenario. And I think often those problems are larger in their heads than they are to players. And also, this whole thing is a problem of their own making. They're sitting here basically, terrified that people may change their conduits too much. But here's the thing, if conduits are a system that they now think they have to tightly control via a system like Conduit energy, then why did they make conduits the way they did in the first place? With a clear flaw that Blizzard obviously thought they needed another system to fix. And it's things like this that make me feel like this game is in eternal beta, and that they basically don't really know what they're doing, and that they do not have the capability to reliably develop systems like this in a way that does not damage the game, and basically waste all of our time, because pussyfooting around things like this is just about the most boring thing for me to talk about here. It's boring enough for our characters. Honestly, we had this pretty much down pat with glyphs in Wrath of the Lich King. Why are we having this conversation again? And to note, Conduit energy does not matter to me whatsoever personally. I set it and forget it. I only play one spec on my hunter. That's that. So it doesn't do anything for me. It doesn't actually impact my day-to-day gameplay, right? And many other players, I imagine, feel the same way as me. But for the other players, this is a frustrating system for them. So the thing is, I and many of the other sort of casual players that I know, we do not notice this restriction whatsoever. So I imagine most WoW players don't notice this. So then you have to think, if all this is doing is harming a small slice of the player base, and forcing Blizzard to have to put even more time into balance in making these little band-aid systems, then is it not all just a colossal waste of time and energy for the whole lot of us? I think so. And next up, it's time for another controversial one, mainly for the performance-focused player, so won't impact me, might impact you. Mike asked if Blizzard have got plans to reforge or refund legendaries. Now, the idea here is that when Blizzard maybe change balance in a new patch, what they also do is they change the stat weight for many different specs. Now, many players will then want to tweak the stats on their already built legendaries over to what is better based on Blizzard's class changes. Now, of course, it's the whole thing with these legendaries. You can set your secondary stats when you make them, which is a pretty damn cool feature. Well, Ian here said that they've got no plans for any refunds or reforging and the likes of patch 9.1, and he had the extra little whammy for some people that if you craft a Covenant-specific legendary and then switch Covenants, you will have to craft another legendary for that new Covenant, which I guess isn't too surprising, really. Now look, I get Blizzard not wanting people to reforge their Lego all the time, but it seems like it would A, be easy to do, B, wouldn't impact the game that much, while C, improving the usability of the legendary system in general, I suppose. I mean, maybe they're worried that if you could dismantle a legendary to get the Soul Ash back to maybe rebuild it, that people would, just do that all the time instead and eat the raw material cost instead of, grind up loads and loads and loads of legendaries. Maybe they'd be worried that would cut gameplay out of the game. I mean, hell, right now, we do have some interactions like having to recraft the same legendary power on a new slot. And of course, that's something that I think a lot of people will want to do when they look at the raids, the new raids loot table, right? They might want to do that. And it's really like with much of what was cast to the future, sort of a can kicked down the road in this interview, my thought here is if we're thinking about these things, why not just do them now? I mean, Ian did acknowledge that they're aware of players' issues here. And I guess for me, it's just I'm a bit worried about how many of these pain points they're seemingly very comfortable leaving in the game until future patches. They continually do this, only to fix things up after the launch of the expansion's final patch. And once more, it feels like this is stuff that should have been thought about and handled during beta. And it's the sort of thing that, again, can make Modern World of Warcraft feel like you are playing a paid beta test. I mean, it just sometimes feels like they don't exactly know what they're doing with these systems, and they don't really have the foresight to see how they'll play out, which is sometimes rather surprising. Okay, that was all a bunch of doom. I do have something good, though, because, well, first, Ian said that the data-mined domination gem stuff from PTR is very work in progress, and not to take too much stock in it. But he did clarify that the idea here is that you'll get slots for domination shards in gear. Right now it's on the cloaks that drop in the new raid, and that you will earn and upgrade your shards by doing the raid. So some of the shard bonuses will only work in the raid, others will work outside of the raid, and overall their thought here is they want raiders to primarily gear up when doing raiding. They want some of that raid gear to be the best in raids. But of course, for those raiders to have the option to fill out their other slots by doing other activities, and they believe that, say, the increased item level of PvP gear will keep it so that, the domination shards aren't too much of a problem for the PvP players. So hopefully that works out. I can't really speak to the PvP concerns. I will say this, as a raider though, Heroic Curve raider, I do like the sound of this system, It seems to be light touch enough to not dominate the entire tier, hopefully, while also giving us raiders a little more to work towards and just, a few more rewards while we're going. Seems reasonable enough to me. Okay, the Mage Tower. So, there's an odd thing, and he very much confirmed this, saying it is exactly this, that the Mage Tower spawned from them having cool artifact appearances and then wanting to find a source for them. That then led to the idea of a solo challenge, and it is that led to the Mage Tower that we got in the game. And Ian said that they are pretty much, looking for a reward compelling enough for a bit of content like the Mage Tower to actually be appealing for people to, slog through, because it's hard. And, he did also say that, Blizzard internally, they love the Mage Tower as much as many players do. I'll just say this, it felt really ass backwards of a way to do it from my perspective. I mean, surely you would want to start by creating a bit of content you think players would absolutely love, and then you think about designing a reward worthy of that challenge. So it's something where players have been wanting this for a long time. So rather than sit around thinking about, what reward could we possibly do? I mean, in my opinion, if people want this so badly, just make it, build it at the next possible opportunity, and come up with a reward that would make sense. It seems like a simple solution to me. Okay, alt catch-up was covered, and it essentially boiled down to this, and I think it's actually quite true. Some players see alts purely as being for endgame content only, which means that much of their progression in those alts is just a roadblock to, say, taking that alt into a raid. Now, Ian countered that that is a very true thing, but that also, from Blizzard's data, they, or just, from their perspective, they do see many people who cap out progression on their main character, at least the progression they could realistically do, and then they rolls up some alts to do more progression. So in this expansion, doing an alt in a new Covenant as an example. So Ian's thing and the team's thing is that if you add a whole bunch of skips for the high-end players, what you'll do is you'll take progression away from the casuals and cut that thing out. And honestly, this is where I'd say basically, yeah, I agree, but what we need overall is a balance. And I think there's multiple ways of doing that balance. I'll just say this, from my personal experience, I quite liked it in Mists of Pandaria. There, if you would cap VP in your main character, you'd get a 50% VP boost on your alts. Also for reputations, you'd cap a reputation on your main, you buy a little book from the vendor, and that would double your rep gains on your other characters. So I wonder if little things like that could be useful. Certainly though, I think that, doing the renown catch-up in another manner is something that wouldn't hurt the casual players. It wouldn't cut content out for them because, come on, doing those weeklies isn't really content that much. And I guess another thing many people want is skips for the Covenant campaign. I couldn't see that harming people too much, but then and again, it is that thing, like if you're doing the Kyrian campaign 3 times in a row, that's going to be very boring. So maybe a way Blizzard could do it is, if you've done the Night Fae campaign, say in your Hunter, and then you do the Night Fae campaign again in your Warlock, well, maybe you could skip it in your Warlock. But if that Warlock was going to, I don't know, another Covenant, maybe it wouldn't be able to skip that campaign if you haven't done it already. That said, I think almost every Warlock goes Night Fae anyway, but you get my point. So they can probably do more here. A little bit more balance is probably needed, I guess. All right, time for some other things then. So AoE cap, basically it boils down to this for them. Uncapped AoE impacts Mythic Plus gameplay metas massively. Now, it did very much seem like Ian acknowledged that it does feel quite strange to have the AoE cap in Legacy content, but broadly, they seem to want to just keep it and then advance it, maybe do some tweaks, so maybe they will do that. It's that thing where it would just be flat out better if, the AoE cap didn't exist when doing Legacy content, although that would create an inconsistency in the game that wouldn't really feel that natural, so I guess there's that. Now moving on then to World Quests. Mike asked, World Quest 2.0, what was that? And I very much agree. There are changes, of course, between how World Quests were in the past expansion and this one. And basically, Ian said that the lack of artifact power has impacted World Quests, as artifact power was the main motivator for doing them in the past. Anima is optional, so fewer people feel like they need to do the World Quests. And then for the quests themselves, well, Blizzard made the quests longer and smaller in quantity so that your ratio of time spent doing them to time spent, traveling to them was more in the favor of time spent doing them. Overall, though, they seem to agree that the reward loop isn't super satisfying right now, and it seems they may need to just reevaluate a little bit the place of world quests in the game, to which I say, fair enough. Maybe let's think about some old school reputations that are, not tied to an AP, but are tied to some sort of cool reward, like what they did with Netherwing. Beyond that, then, there was some talk, with Mythic Raid-like topics, not my area of expertise, obviously. Basically, the team said they are fine with power creep within a tier right now, but it seemed like Preach and a lot of other Mythic Raiders disagree. And I guess if I was to add my opinions here, it would seem to me like it's a case of Ian working off the overall sort of averaged out numbers and the top level view of the whole player base, whereas maybe for the top end players, they're able to produce disproportionately larger power gap results because of their enhanced ability to maximally exploit the potential of a more complexly structured endgame with all the different aspects of player power. So it could be something like that. Now for raid externals and balance, it seems like Mike might have killed Death Knight. more seriously, maybe there'll be an absorb cap coming back for AMZ. And generally, Blizzard said that they know rogues are a bit lacking in utility and that they generally prefer class utility over spec utility, and that they want to raise up the number of melee spots within a typical raid comp, because right now it is a bit more skewed to ranged. Also, they want to think about healer DPS, and they kind of talked around it for a bit. I just think it's basically this. It's a problem they're aware of, and it's kind of hard to say because you could fix this problem very quickly, right? By basically just changing the damage done to healing produced ratio of something like Atonement. But obviously it's a situation where that is an easy fix, but also they wouldn't want to punish Disc Priests and Holy Paladins, say, in world content. So I guess there's that. Conclusions then. What is my conclusion? Overall, I mean, my initial reaction, which I posted it like maybe halfway into the interview, was, man, World of Warcraft feels like a paid beta test sometimes. And I really do think it does. Outside of things like raiding. Okay, Stone Legion Generals may have felt a little bit like that, but I digress. You know, the things that are Blizzard staples, like, the zones looking awesome, the PvP stuff being fun, the dungeons being really awesome, the raids being really awesome, they pretty much knock it out of the park every single time they do one of those bits of content, right? But they keep on, trying to reinvent the wheel with all of these systems. And it's like with Conduit Energy, people weren't that happy, Blizzard are now considering more tweaks. And I get being responsive to player feedback in a live game, a degree of that will always happen, but I think for me, the paid beta test feel is because of how rough things often feel at expansion and patch launch. And I guess that's just the issue, Patch 8.3, that felt like a paid beta test because you fast forward 2 or 3 months, and suddenly Patch 8.3 is a far more well-rounded experience. You look at Shadowlands, Torghast, come on, that's just paid beta vibes to hell, right? And that does make me sad, because I don't think it should be like this. I don't really know what to say, other than maybe there is something they need to change in how they overall plan, how their productions work at Blizzard. I couldn't say what that is. Maybe they actually just need more team members and they need to hire up. Maybe that's what it is. Who knows? It seems like Toys for Bob are helping Blizzard with Overwatch 2, while Vicarious Visions, it's confirmed that they're also now working on Diablo 4. Maybe it is just the case that the WoW team needs some more resources so they can actually do things right first time. Because things often do feel a bit slapdash, and that does make me sad. Now that said, if I was to really try to end this one in a glimmer of hope, Ian seemed to be a lot more realistic about borrowed power this time around, so perhaps that does reflect a genuine willingness within the World of Warcraft team to reevaluate how they've been doing borrowed power. A little bit of how they talked around Covenants, it very much seemed like, we're very happy with Covenants, we love the system, but I don't think we'll do it again. Which, yeah, I get it, they can't say maybe they are genuinely happy with it, even though, 98% of, just some of those statistics are really wild on how many players are going to a certain covenant, in which case I'm like, if 90-something percentage of, people are going to this covenant, why did you make those other 4 abilities into soul binds and then balance them for that class? What's going on? Seems like a bit of a waste of time, but I digress. It seemed like they're willing to really dial down the borrowed power next time round. And in my view, if we get a situation where, a patch 9.2, and I know we're kicking the can down the road again, it's like if a 9.2 actually adds decent rewards to Torghast and builds on the good work of patch 9.1, that will be good. If the tier sets are well received in 9.2, which I imagine they will be, then maybe Blizzard will be content to just roll the tier sets, maybe do, something a bit more glyph-like in the next expansion. And then, I'd just love, after that point, just chill out, man. Just chill out and focus on the content. Give us more than 8 dungeons at launch. Yeah, give us a 10-boss raid. But why not do a Sartharian? Something cool and unique and a bit more fun. Why not sprinkle more content in the game? Instead of just rehashing things for world quests, which it seems like very few people actually like that much, why not create factions that have got little hubs in the world, that have got their own little storylines as you do at endgame, and maybe they've got a really cool, unique new mount at the end. Maybe if all that systems time is freed up, then maybe Blizzard could think about, Could we do a mastery system for this new expansion zones, like how Guild Wars 2 does that, so you can actually, progress your character in another way that doesn't impact your performance? Maybe if they're not spending all their time just spinning their wheels in this, then maybe they'll be able to just put more work into other systems that could actually stand to the base quality of World of Warcraft for, multiple expansions in a row. I mean, it's that sort of thing. If they don't know, if they're just like, oh dear, what do we have for rewards? Cosmetic set, title, mount, pet. It's like, hey guys, if you had done a player housing or something like that a few years ago, well, guess what? You could have just given people a bit of furniture. I mean, hell, I'd do a hard Torghast to unlock a new sofa for my house. Well, it's from Torghast, it probably wouldn't be that comfortable, but you get my point, right? The more we dial back this borrowed power, keep these systems simple, perhaps there'll be more time for World of Warcraft to actually expand instead of just iterating the same thing again and again and again and again. Just that every time they've done that, it's been worse than the one they started with Legion, of course. There we go. Okay. That's my opinions. Certainly, things are a little bit mixed. Yeah, I'll admit that. But as I've long said, because people really sometimes get the wrong idea, patch 9.1. Look, even if the Torghast stuff is a load of junk and Korthia is a load of junk, I know at least the raid gear stuff sounds cool. The new raid seems really, really cool. There's a mega dungeon to do, and there's stuff like getting into Mythic Plus, which still would be fun to me. So. I'm still going to play the game. There'll still be a bunch of fun for me to have. I think sometimes, you just think about potential, and it's a little bit frustrating when you do that, when you see some of those more clear blunders. So that's my opinions. What are your opinions? Drop them down below in that big old comment hole that YouTube has. Of course, if you would like an axe to put on your person, then hey, I've dropped it. The Patreon link is down below. That's it for me. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you think. I'll see you next time.